When Jamal Carter, a successful project manager and New Orleans native, came home one late evening, all he wanted was a quiet night in his own apartment. Little did he know, what should have been a simple return to his home would turn into a viral ordeal. Standing between him and his front door was a woman many would refer to as a Karen, someone who acted as if she owned not just her home but the entire neighborhood, her sense of entitlement and prejudice clutched tighter than a purse on a crowded train. Jamal had just parked his car, heading towards his apartment building's entrance, when he noticed someone in the lobby, watching him with intent. He tried to ignore it, assuming it was nothing, but as soon as he placed his key into the lock, she pounced, stepping directly into his path, blocking his way, as though he were a stranger in his own life. And this was just the beginning. What started as a minor inconvenience spiraled quickly into a horrifying, rage-inducing ordeal, one with a woman accusing Jamal of being an intruder, and then pepper-spraying him, all before calling the police, trying to destroy the reputation and life of an innocent man. All the while, her entitlement and ignorance were caught on camera for the entire world to see. But Jamal was not who she thought he was about to show her, and the police, the undeniable power of the truth. What happened next left everyone, including the police, utterly stunned. Jamal took a deep breath, trying to process the surreal situation. The woman stood in his way, perfectly poised, her blonde hair styled immaculately, her designer clothes boasting of wealth, an attitude sharp enough to cut glass. Her eyes bored into him, as if she owned the building. "Excuse me, can I help you?" Jamal asked, keeping his tone measured and calm. Her eyes narrowed, arms folding over her chest. "Actually, I should be asking you that," she replied, her words dripping with disdain. "I haven't seen you around here before, and you look suspicious. You don't live here, do you?" Her voice held a judgment all too familiar to Jamal, a tone he had experienced countless times before, a tone reserved for people like him, black people. Jamal let out a sigh, trying to keep his cool. "Yes, I do live here. I've lived here for almost a year now," he said, trying to step around her, but she sidestepped, mirroring his movements with a swiftness that made it clear she was not going to let him pass. "Oh, I don't think so," she snapped, her voice icy. "You look like you're up to something shady. Maybe here to deal drugs, or worse. I know your type." Jamal clenched his jaw, frustration building. Years of navigating situations like this had taught him to stay calm, that raising his voice or making sudden moves could easily escalate things. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his key card, showing it to her clearly. "This is my key," he said firmly. "Now please, step aside." But she didn't budge. Her lips pressed into a thin, tight line. "If you're really a resident, you wouldn't mind waiting here while I call security," she said, her tone smug. "If you've got nothing to hide, you won't mind proving it." The absurdity of the situation gnawed at Jamal. Here he was, in front of his own apartment building, being forced to prove his innocence to a stranger who had decided, solely based on the color of his skin, that he didn't belong. He looked around, hoping someone would intervene, but the other residents who passed by quickly looked away, choosing not to get involved. Seeing her hover her finger over her phone, Jamal knew she was serious about calling the police. He pulled out his driver's license, holding it out for her to see. "Look, here's my ID. It has my address. Now, may I go in?" She barely glanced at it, her expression unchanged. "For all I know, that's fake," she said, scoffing. "I've read about people like you, sneaking into places you don't belong. This neighborhood is going downhill, and it's because people like me don't do their part to keep an eye on things." Her words echoed through Jamal's mind, "people like you." He knew exactly what she meant. A surge of anger shot through Jamal, but he kept his tone steady. People like me, he echoed, his voice rising slightly. Yes, people like me, she sneered back, who care about safety and security. I'm calling the cops. If you really belong here, I'm sure they'll confirm it. Jamal felt his stomach drop. He knew, all too well, how situations like this could turn out. How easily the police might believe her over him, how one wrong move could end in tragedy. He reached for his phone and started recording, documenting everything in case it went sideways. "Oh, now you're recording me," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Go ahead, record. You think I'm scared? The police are going to be on my side. You're the one trespassing here." Jamal was done with being patient. "I've done nothing wrong. I'm just trying to get into my own home," he said, his voice louder now, his frustration evident. Without warning, she pulled out a can of pepper spray and aimed it at him, spraying him directly in the face. Jamal stumbled back, his eyes burning, tears streaming down his face as he fought to keep his phone steady, capturing her triumphant, self-satisfied smirk. He heard her call the police, her voice carrying, "He's trying to break into our building. I caught him before he could do anything." Minutes later, Jamal could hear sirens approaching, red and blue lights flashing as two officers pulled up in front of the building. She ran over to them immediately, her voice loud, desperate. "Thank God you're here. This man tried to break into our building. I stopped him." Jamal, still recording, turned towards the officers. "Officers, I live here. I have my key, my ID, my car is parked right over there," he said, his voice pained as he wiped his face. "She assaulted me with pepper spray for no reason." One of the officers approached him, clearly conflicted. "Sir, can we see your ID?" Jamal nodded, handing it over, his eyes bloodshot from the pepper spray. The officer examined it, then looked back at Jamal. "We'll verify this, but please wait here." The woman interjected, her voice dripping with entitlement. "Why are you even checking? Look at him, I'm telling you, he doesn't belong here." The officers ignored her, proceeding to verify Jamal's information. Moments later, their demeanor shifted. "Ma'am, his address matches this building," one officer said, his tone sharp. She stammered, her face paling. That can't be right. He must be lying." The officer shook his head. "He's not lying, ma'am. We're going to need you to step aside." Jamal continued recording, capturing the moment her self-assured demeanor crumbled, her face a mixture of shock and fear. The officer turned to Jamal. "Mr. Carter, would you like to press charges for the assault?" The question sent a wave of relief through him. "Yes, officer, I would," he replied, his voice steady. The woman gasped, her face twisting in disbelief. "You can't do this." "I was trying to protect the building," she protested, but the officer had heard enough. "Ma'am, your actions have consequences. This man had every right to enter his own home," he said, leading her towards the squad car, her protests ignored. The officer returned Jamal's belongings, his expression sincere. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, sir. Unfortunately, we've seen a rise in incidents like these." Jamal nodded, his face still stinging from the pepper spray, his heart heavy with the weight of it all. That night, he posted the footage online, his story raw and honest. Within days, it went viral, the public outcry swift and loud. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting not just the woman's actions, but the systemic issues at play, the racism, the assumptions, the sheer injustice. The management of his apartment building reached out, apologizing profusely, offering to cover any legal costs Jamal chose to pursue. Messages of support poured in from all over the country, his community rallying behind him. For Jamal, the experience was a bitter reminder of the challenges he faced, even in his own neighborhood, even with his success and achievements. But it also reminded him of his own resilience, of the strength found in standing up for himself, for his right to simply exist, unbothered and unjudged, in his own space. He had faced prejudice, but he had stood firm, and the world had stood with him, opening its eyes to the harsh realities that he and so many others faced daily. And maybe, just maybe, it was one small step toward a better understanding of the injustices Black people endure every day.